Imagine for a moment that it's 6:15 in the morning. You're 68 years old, recently retired, and enjoying a slower pace of life. The alarm clock isn't rushing you to work anymore. The house is quiet. The world feels peaceful. You walk into the kitchen, start the coffee maker, and settle into your favorite chair. Like millions of people over 60, you've built a morning routine that feels comforting because you've repeated it thousands of times. What most people don't realize, however, is that the first hour after waking may be one of the most important periods of the day when it comes to protecting the brain and cardiovascular system. In fact, many cardiologists pay special attention to the morning hours because this is when several natural changes occur inside the body simultaneously. Blood pressure begins rising. Heart rate starts increasing. Hormones that help you wake up flood the bloodstream. Blood vessels respond to the transition from sleep to activity. For healthy individuals, these changes are usually harmless. But for adults with underlying cardiovascular risk factors, these normal physiological changes can create a situation where even small lifestyle mistakes begin to matter much more than people realize. Most people think strokes happen suddenly and without warning. A person appears healthy one moment and then suffers a devastating medical emergency the next. While that sometimes appears to be true from the outside, doctors know the reality is often very different. The processes that eventually contribute to a stroke frequently begin years before symptoms ever appear. Arteries slowly become less flexible. Blood pressure quietly damages delicate vessel walls. Plaque gradually accumulates in arteries that supply oxygen-rich blood to the brain. Inflammation affects circulation. Blood sugar fluctuations place additional strain on the cardiovascular system. Because these changes occur slowly, many people never notice them. They continue living normally, believing everything is fine because they don't feel sick. Unfortunately, the body doesn't always provide obvious warnings when damage is occurring beneath the surface. That's why prevention becomes so important, especially after the age of 60, when cardiovascular risk naturally begins to increase. Let me tell you about a man we'll call Robert. Robert was 73 years old and considered himself healthier than most of his friends. He didn't smoke. He enjoyed spending time outdoors. He maintained a reasonable weight and visited his doctor regularly. Every morning, he followed the exact same routine. He woke up, brewed a strong cup of coffee, turned on the television, and spent the next 2 hours sitting in his recliner watching the news. He rarely drank water until lunchtime. The habit seemed harmless because it had become second nature. One morning, he noticed slight dizziness when standing up. He dismissed it as normal aging. A few weeks later, he experienced brief tingling in one side of his face. Again, he ignored it because the sensation disappeared quickly. Several months later, while speaking to a neighbor, he suddenly struggled to form complete sentences. His speech became slurred and confusing. Fortunately, the symptoms resolved within minutes, and he was rushed to the hospital. Doctors later explained that he had experienced a transient ischemic attack, often called a mini-stroke. It served as a warning sign that blood flow to part of his brain had been temporarily interrupted. While no single factor caused his condition, physicians identified several contributing habits that had quietly increased his risk over time. One of the most overlooked morning habits among older adults is starting the day dehydrated and remaining dehydrated for several hours. During sleep, the body naturally loses fluids through breathing, perspiration, and normal metabolic processes. By the time most people wake up, they have gone 6 to 8 hours without consuming any water. For younger individuals, the body often compensates effectively. However, as we age, the sensation of thirst becomes less reliable. Many older adults don't feel thirsty even when their bodies need fluids. This can lead to chronic mild dehydration that persists day after day. While dehydration alone does not directly cause every stroke, it can contribute to conditions that place additional strain on the cardiovascular system. Blood volume may decrease, circulation can become less efficient, and the heart may need to work harder to maintain adequate blood flow throughout the body. What makes the situation even more concerning is that many people replace water with coffee immediately after waking. Now, coffee itself is not necessarily harmful. In fact, moderate coffee consumption has been associated with certain health benefits in many studies. The issue is that coffee often becomes a substitute for hydration, rather than a complement to it. People wake up dehydrated, consume caffeine, remain seated for long periods, and continue neglecting water intake until much later in the day. Over months and years, these patterns can contribute to poor cardiovascular habits that are rarely recognized because they feel completely normal. Human beings tend to underestimate the power of small, daily behaviors. We expect major health problems to come from major mistakes. Yet many cardiovascular specialists would argue that it is often the accumulation of small, seemingly insignificant habits that produces the greatest long-term impact on health. The choices you make during the first hour of your day may seem trivial, but repeated thousands of times over the course of a decade, they become a powerful influence on your overall well-being. The challenge is that the consequences rarely appear immediately. If someone smokes a cigarette, they don't develop lung disease the next day. If someone eats an unhealthy breakfast, they don't suffer a heart attack that afternoon. Likewise, if someone remains dehydrated every morning, the effects may take years to become visible. This delay creates a dangerous illusion. People assume their habits must be harmless because nothing bad has happened yet. In reality, the body is constantly responding to the choices we make. Every day contributes to the future condition of our arteries, blood vessels, heart, and brain. The good news is that the same principle works in the opposite direction as well. Positive habits may seem small today, but their benefits accumulate over time just as powerfully as unhealthy habits accumulate risk. That is why understanding what happens inside the body during those critical morning hours can become one of the most valuable investments you make in your future health. Now here's where the story becomes even more interesting. Many people assume that the most dangerous time for a stroke would be during intense exercise, heavy physical labor, or periods of extreme stress. Surprisingly, researchers have observed that a significant number of cardiovascular events occur during the morning hours, particularly within the first few hours after waking. This doesn't mean mornings are dangerous by themselves. Rather, it highlights how dramatically the body changes during that period. As you wake up, your nervous system becomes more active. Cortisol levels rise. Adrenaline begins circulating. Blood pressure naturally increases as the body prepares for movement and activity. In younger adults with healthy arteries, these changes occur smoothly. However, in older adults whose blood vessels may already be affected by plaque buildup, hypertension, diabetes, or years of inflammation, the morning transition can place additional stress on an already vulnerable cardiovascular system. Imagine a garden hose that's been exposed to years of sunlight. When it's brand new, it's flexible and resilient. Water flows through it easily. But over time, the material becomes stiffer and less adaptable. Human arteries experience something similar as we age. Healthy arteries expand and contract with each heartbeat. As they become stiffer, the heart must work harder to pump blood effectively. High blood pressure becomes more common. Blood flow dynamics change. This doesn't happen overnight. It develops gradually, over decades. The problem is that many people continue evaluating their health based solely on how they feel. If they can still walk around the neighborhood, play with grandchildren, and perform daily activities, they assume everything must be fine. Unfortunately, vascular disease often progresses silently until a major event finally forces attention. One of the biggest mistakes adults make is ignoring subtle warning signs. The body frequently sends messages before serious problems occur. Brief episodes of dizziness, temporary numbness in the fingers, sudden balance issues, short periods of confusion, difficulty finding words during conversation, vision disturbances that come and go. Many individuals dismiss these symptoms because they disappear quickly. They assume they were tired, stressed, or simply having an off day. In some cases, however, these symptoms may represent transient disruptions in blood flow to the brain. These events should never be ignored, particularly in adults over 60. Seeking medical evaluation early can sometimes identify underlying cardiovascular issues before a more serious emergency develops. Another morning habit that concerns many healthcare professionals is remaining completely sedentary immediately after waking. Think about the average morning routine. A person gets out of bed, walks a short distance to the kitchen, sits down with coffee, turns on the television, and remains seated for hours. From a circulation perspective, this is not ideal. The human body was designed for movement. Muscles help pump blood back toward the heart. Walking improves circulation. Gentle activity supports vascular function. Even light movement can encourage healthy blood flow. This doesn't mean every senior needs to begin running marathons. In fact, simple activities often provide meaningful benefits. A 10-minute walk, light stretching, gardening, walking the dog, tidying the house. These activities may seem insignificant, but their cumulative effects on circulation can be substantial over time. Let's talk about stress because it plays a much larger role in cardiovascular health than many people realize. Modern mornings often begin with a flood of negativity. News headlines focus on disasters, economic uncertainty, political conflict, crime, and fear. Within minutes of waking, many people expose themselves to information that triggers anxiety and tension. The body responds accordingly. Stress hormones increase, blood pressure rises, heart rate accelerates, muscles tighten. Over time, chronic stress can contribute to cardiovascular strain. What's fascinating is that the brain often reacts to psychological stress in ways that closely resemble its response to physical threats. Your body doesn't always distinguish between being chased by a predator and reading alarming news headlines. Both situations can trigger physiological stress responses. Consider Margaret, a retired teacher in her late 70s. Every morning, she immediately checked financial markets, political updates, and social media discussions. By breakfast, she was often frustrated, angry, or anxious. Her blood pressure readings consistently spiked during the early hours of the day. Her physician eventually encouraged her to change her routine. Instead of beginning each morning with stressful information, she started taking a short walk, practicing deep breathing exercises, and enjoying breakfast before checking the news. Within several months, she noticed improvements not only in her mood, but also in her blood pressure management. The lesson wasn't that news causes strokes. Rather, it demonstrated how daily stress patterns can influence overall cardiovascular health. Sleep quality is another factor that deserves attention. Many adults over 60 experience disrupted sleep, yet assume it's simply part of aging. They wake up multiple times during the night. They feel tired throughout the day. They snore heavily or wake up gasping for air. Conditions such as sleep apnea can place tremendous strain on the cardiovascular system. During episodes of interrupted breathing, oxygen levels may decrease. Blood pressure may fluctuate. The heart works harder. Over months and years, these effects can contribute to cardiovascular risk. Unfortunately, millions of people remain undiagnosed because they never discuss sleep issues with their healthcare providers. They assume fatigue is normal when it may actually represent a treatable medical concern. The important thing to understand is that stroke prevention is rarely about one dramatic intervention. Most of the time, it involves identifying and improving multiple small factors that collectively influence health. Hydration, movement, sleep, nutrition, stress management, medication adherence when prescribed, blood pressure control. These elements interact with one another continuously. Improving even one area can create positive momentum that benefits the others. The goal is not perfection. The goal is progress. Every positive adjustment contributes to a healthier environment for the heart and brain. Over time, those small adjustments may become some of the most important investments you ever make in your long-term health and independence. Now let's talk about something that surprises many people when they first learn about it. High blood pressure often causes absolutely no symptoms until significant damage has already occurred. That's why physicians frequently refer to it as the silent threat. A person can feel completely healthy while elevated blood pressure gradually affects blood vessels throughout the body. The heart works harder with every beat. Delicate vessels in the brain experience increased stress. The kidneys must operate under greater pressure. The eyes can even be affected. Yet because the process is usually painless, people assume nothing is wrong. This creates a dangerous situation where individuals rely on how they feel rather than objective measurements. One of the biggest mistakes adults over 60 make is believing that feeling fine automatically means everything is fine. Unfortunately, cardiovascular disease doesn't always announce its presence until much later. Think about how many people wake up each morning, drink coffee, eat breakfast, and continue their day without ever checking their blood pressure. Months turn into years. During that time, small elevations may slowly become larger ones. Many people don't discover the problem until a routine doctor's visit reveals numbers that have been climbing for years. Others discover it only after experiencing a serious cardiovascular event. This is why healthcare professionals place such emphasis on monitoring blood pressure, particularly as people age. Knowledge creates opportunity. When problems are identified early, there is often time to take meaningful action. Another issue that often goes unnoticed involves circulation. Healthy circulation is something most people never think about because it operates automatically. Blood delivers oxygen and nutrients to every organ, every muscle, and every tissue in the body. However, as circulation becomes less efficient, subtle symptoms may begin appearing. Some people notice cold hands or feet. Others experience leg fatigue during walks they previously completed easily. Some develop swelling around the ankles. Others notice slower healing from minor injuries. While these symptoms can have many causes, They sometimes indicate that the cardiovascular system is working harder than it once did. The challenge is that people often accept these changes as unavoidable consequences of aging, rather than signals worth discussing with a healthcare professional. Let's consider another common morning habit that may indirectly affect cardiovascular health: consuming highly processed breakfasts. Walk through the breakfast aisle of almost any grocery store, and you'll find products marketed as convenient, healthy, and heart-friendly. Yet many contain significant amounts of added sugar, sodium, and highly processed ingredients. The problem isn't necessarily one breakfast on one morning. The problem is repetition. Eating the same unhealthy foods every day for years can gradually influence weight, blood sugar control, inflammation, and blood pressure. The body responds to patterns. Just as a savings account grows through consistent deposits, health outcomes are often shaped by consistent behaviors repeated over long periods. Imagine two individuals entering their 70s. One begins each morning with processed pastries, sugary drinks, and hours of inactivity. The other starts the day with a balanced breakfast, adequate hydration, and a short walk. Neither person notices dramatic differences after a single week, perhaps not even after a single month. But after 10 years, the cumulative impact of those routines may be enormous. This is one of the most important principles in preventive health. Small choices rarely feel powerful in the moment. Their power becomes visible only after they have been repeated hundreds or thousands of times. One of the most fascinating aspects of stroke prevention is how interconnected everything becomes. Sleep affects blood pressure. Blood pressure affects blood vessels. Nutrition influences inflammation. Inflammation affects circulation. Physical activity supports cardiovascular function. Stress impacts hormones. Hormones influence blood pressure and heart rate. Nothing operates in isolation. That's why focusing on a single miracle solution rarely produces meaningful results. Health is built through systems rather than shortcuts. The healthiest older adults often aren't the ones chasing the newest supplement or trend. They're the ones consistently practicing simple habits year after year. Let's talk about warning signs that many people ignore. Some individuals experience brief episodes of weakness in one arm or one leg. Others notice difficulty speaking clearly. Some experience sudden confusion or trouble understanding conversations. Temporary vision loss in one eye can also occur. In some cases, these symptoms disappear within minutes, causing people to assume everything is fine. However, these events may represent temporary disruptions in blood flow that should never be ignored. Prompt medical attention can be critical. The sooner a potential problem is evaluated, the greater the opportunity to identify risk factors and develop an appropriate plan. Fear often prevents people from seeking medical advice. They worry about what doctors might find. They convince themselves that symptoms are insignificant. They tell themselves they'll make an appointment next month. Unfortunately, delaying evaluation can allow problems to progress. The goal isn't to become anxious about every ache and pain. The goal is to respect the body's signals and take them seriously when they occur. Prevention is always easier than recovery. A small problem identified today may prevent a much larger problem tomorrow. Another overlooked issue among adults over 60 is social isolation. Many people focus exclusively on physical health, while underestimating the importance of emotional and social well-being. Human beings are social creatures. Meaningful relationships influence stress levels, mental health, motivation, and even physical activity. Studies have repeatedly shown associations between loneliness and poorer health outcomes. People who remain socially connected often find it easier to stay active, maintain routines, and engage in healthy behaviors. A conversation with a friend, participation in a community group, or regular family interaction may contribute more to overall well-being than many people realize. The encouraging news is that the body possesses remarkable resilience. Positive changes made in your 60s, 70s, and even 80s can still produce meaningful benefits. Better hydration can support circulation. Improved sleep can help regulate blood pressure. Increased physical activity can strengthen cardiovascular function. Healthier nutrition can support metabolic health. Stress reduction can improve overall quality of life. None of these changes guarantee perfect health, but together they create an environment that supports the heart and brain far more effectively than neglecting them. The important thing is not where you start. The important thing is that you start. In the final section, we'll cover the morning routine many cardiologists recommend, practical steps seniors can take immediately, real-life success stories, and the powerful mindset shift that helps people protect their health for decades.